Okay, so I did want to post a kind of a response to one of Tetsubo's videos talking about action points and just to kind of give some of my thoughts on the subject. And I probably come from a bit of a different background than maybe most people. Sorry about that. In that a lot of my formative years in role playing, and especially my earliest years, come from a background of the Star Wars D6 role playing game, and as many of my viewers probably know, I'm a big fan of that system in general. And it was an action point driven system. In fact, as I kind of put a comment on Tetsubo's original video, but I thought I would expand on it here. In that I really liked the character point mechanics, which are basically the action point mechanics in the Star Wars D6, because they represented, there was a duality to them. They weren't just kind of throwaway reroll action points the way most systems do. They actually serve two purposes, both as a resource for allowing characters to influence some of their die rolls from time to time, but the character points actually also served as your character's experience points. So they were handed out at the end of adventures, just like experience points to the players, and so you would use those to increase your skills. And so the nice thing about that was that, as Tetsubo mentioned in his video, that one of the hang-ups that he has about action point systems is that he never knows when to use them, and so he kind of feels behind the curve when compared to some of the other players. So, you know, if the other players have 5 action points and they're spending them throughout the course of the adventure, and he chooses not to spend them, or he doesn't know when to spend them, or, you know, basically has that disconnect with that resource, and then he kind of feels like he's dragging behind, like, you know, his character isn't competing on the same level as the other PCs because he's not using a resource that the other PCs are using. But so the nice thing about the D6 system was that those points, you accumulated those points and they stayed on your character sheet in a pool, and during the course of the adventure, if you chose to use them, then they would give you little benefits. If you felt that there was a role that you didn't want to fail, you know, it was important to you, and then you could kind of influence that. You know, you could take knock some of those bad die rolls out of your way. But at the same time, if situations like that didn't happen to come up for your character during the adventure, or if you didn't feel like you didn't know when was the right time, or none of the rolls felt significant enough that you wanted to spend those character points, or you didn't roll badly enough that you really needed their help, those stay on your character sheet, and so you can use those later on to improve your character. So you never got penalized for holding on to character points. In fact, you generally wanted to hold on to a handful of them, but then you also wanted to spend a good deal of them to try to improve your character. So that was one of the things that has really inspired me, and I don't think there's really any other system I've seen that has done that in terms of the duality. But it has influenced my perception on games, and that I generally do like games that have some element, some resource that allows the players to kind of fiddle with die rolls from time to time. I don't like it to be too prevalent. I like there to be enough of them that the players aren't, that they know that they can spend them when they think it's important, and there's not like a scenario within the adventure that you must spend character points on. If you don't have any character points or action points during this scene, well, then your character is screwed. But that they could kind of sprinkle them throughout the game for roles where success was important to them. Some systems do this to greater or lesser effect, but I also like it when they kind of branch out the effects of, when games branch out the effects of those action points to encompass more things, rather than maybe just re-rolling, as Azric pointed out in one of the comments as well. The unit system, especially the cinematic unit system, Buffy and Angel and Army of Darkness, use drama points, and drama points have a wide variety of over-the-top effects, and it helps it kind of emulate the genre. And so they allow you to influence die rolls, but they also allow you to basically introduce plot hooks or subplots, allow you to kind of get a second wind to recover some health that when your character's really beaten down, and like in those kind of action drama shows where somebody looks like they took a really bad hit, but then they get up and it's really not as bad as it seemed, and stuff like that. Things that give the players a little bit of narrative power from time to time, and I like those because as the game master, I don't like to fudge. I used to fudge more than I do now, but I really don't like to do it. And the excuse that I like to have for that is by giving players some kind of resource so that they can fudge their own die rolls, so that I don't have to do any fudging on my end. I just say, well, if it's a little too tough, then they ought to be kind of looking at choosing to spend some of these points that they've got. And just as Alikov had mentioned in his response video, I kind of take a design approach that is neutral to the use of action points. I don't design an encounter specifically intending for them to use them, nor do I design an encounter expecting or intending for them not to. That's just generally because my approach to encounter design, if you couldn't even call it design, because I probably develop concepts for an encounter, but I don't strictly, rigidly define the encounter beforehand. I kind of let encounters happen in the way that seems organic to how we're pursuing through the adventure. And so, I just let it happen. And sometimes I roll really well, and the players aren't rolling so well, and so they have something to fall back on. Likewise, sometimes as the GM, I'm rolling really poorly for what should be a dramatic scenario, and the players are rolling really well. And so for major NPCs, they might have a sprinkling of action points that they can use to kind of flesh that out a little bit. And it doesn't make me feel like I'm cheating as a GM, because I'm telling myself that I have a certain kind of resource, and kind of once it's gone, it's gone. And so if the players truly bested me, then I'll bow out and admit defeat. So that's kind of my approach to action points. I like them a lot. I like a lot of games that use points that allow you to influence your rolls. Again, probably comes from my formative years, but in games that I've played, especially like Dungeons and Dragons, say like 3rd edition, even 2nd edition. 2nd edition didn't seem like it bothered me as much, but in 3rd edition, it seems like just generally the probability scales, especially at lower levels, favor randomness a little bit too much for my favor. The flat probability of the D20 compared to kind of the general bonuses that you get to rolls means that sometimes you fail things that you really shouldn't fail. And, you could say, well, maybe the GM shouldn't be calling for rolls in those scenarios, but there are dramatic scenarios where the uncertainty, the probability of the die roll is important, and yet it still doesn't seem like you're really kind of pulling your own weight. And so what I miss when I'm playing games like that, occasionally I feel a little frustration when those scenarios come up, and I look to my character sheet and I'm like, gee, there's really nothing that I can do to kind of help my character through this dramatic moment, or what should be a dramatic moment is kind of spoiled because, gee, I rolled a 4 and I'm 10 points below the difficulty, and there's nothing I can do about it. And so I just see action points as being a representation of the flow of narrative fiction, where the heroes in a fictional narrative tend to kind of pull out ahead when the drama, when the intensity, when the danger is at its height. And so characters, will tend to kind of do amazing things just when they need to, when they need it to happen, and when it's important to progressing the story, or when it helps that character feel like a hero. And so I like that. I like any system that gives players that kind of capability in it, and takes at least a little bit of the brunt of just being at the whim of sheer probabilities. Again, especially with systems that have flat probability curves where there's no kind of averaging going on. So the only way to average those types of systems would be to come up with something that lets them, roll twice and take the average or roll again, at least, thinking maybe that they'll come up on the high end of the probability scale rather than the low end, or whatever it happens to be. They're probably not as necessary in systems that do have a bell curve probability effect. But they can still be useful in those games too. Again, if they do things other than simply providing rerolls. But so anyway, long story short, yes, I like action points. I like them a great deal. I do find that I miss them when I'm playing games that don't have them. Not every game. Not every game needs them. Not every game calls for them. Not every game is designed to incorporate them. I don't think, as Alikov said as well, I don't think I would force them into a game that wasn't designed to use them. But I do find that most of the games I do play generally have some kind of an action point mechanic, and they're fairly popular these days. So, anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear it, and you all have a good day.